Here's something that surprises a lot of Florida homeowners. Your regular homeowner's policy may not cover flood damage. And if your policy is with Citizens, there's a new law that can actually make you ineligible to keep that policy unless you add flood coverage. But here's the thing. A lot of people are confused about who this affects, when it kicks in, and what they actually can do about it. So stick with me because I'm going to break down the whole thing for you, and I'm going to tell you about one smart move most homeowners are completely missing. Hello everyone, I'm Sliwa, a realtor here on the Space Coast. Today we are talking about flood insurance because the rules in Florida have changed, and if you own a home here in Brevard County, whether that's in Melbourne or Satellite Beach and the Atlantic, anywhere on the Space Coast, this could affect you directly. I'm going to walk you through exactly what changed, who it applies to, the specific dates, and dollar amounts you need to know, and the steps you need to take this week. Now let's get into it. So here's the deal. Florida lawmakers updated the eligibility rules for Citizens, which, if you don't know, is a state-backed insurance company that a lot of Florida homeowners use. Under this new law, many Citizens policyholders are now required to carry separate flood insurance in order to keep their Citizens coverage. And this is being rolled out in phases based on your home's replacement value. Now, I know what you've been thinking. Lourdes, I'm not near the water. This probably doesn't apply to me. And that's exactly the kind of assumption that I need to address right now because it's one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear all the time here on the Space Coast. Here in Brevard County, I have buyers that avoid the very island places like Satellite Beach and Melbourne Beach because they assume everything there is in a flood zone. But the reality is flood zones exist in inland too. Your flood risk has more to do with how your home sits on the property and its elevation rather than how close you are to the water. Okay, here are the dates that you need to know because this is where a lot of people are getting caught off guard. January 1st, 2026, if your home's replacement value is $400,000 or more, you are now required to have flood insurance to keep your Citizens policy. That threshold was $500,000 in 2025. So it has already dropped. Now, in January 1st of 2027, the requirement expands to nearly all Citizens' personal residential policies. So if your renewal date falls after those dates and your home meets those values, you need to have flood coverage in place before that renewal. And if you're not sure when your renewal is or what the replacement value is, that's step one. And I'll tell you exactly how to find that out. But here's a quick fact. 25% of flood insurance policies come from properties outside of designated high-risk flood zones. It's Florida. Don't assume just because you're not in a flood zone, you are automatically safe. So here's where most people are getting confused. So let me make this really simple. The law requires you to have enough flood dwelling coverage to either match your Citizens dwelling limit or hit the NFIP cap, whichever one is lower. Now, NFIP stands for the National Flood Insurance Program, which is the federal flood program. Their limits are up to $250,000 for your building structure and up to $100,000 for your contents. Contents means everything in your home. Now, and this is important, if your home's replacement cost is higher than those NFIP limits, you may need to look at a private flood insurance policy to make up the difference. A lot of Space Coast homes are going to fall into that category. And here's where things get really interesting for Space Coast homeowners because there's one move that can actually lower what you're going to pay. That's coming up in just a minute. First, let's talk money. Flood insurance costs vary a lot depending on your home's location, your elevation, your flood zone designation, and if you are in a lower risk area, you might see premiums in a few $100s, or if you're not in a flood zone, they may be a few $100s. But if you are in a coastal area, like right on the ocean, for example, or in a low elevation area where you require flood insurance, it can run into the thousands of dollars. But here's the thing that people consistently miss, and this is important because most flood insurances, policies, have a 30-day waiting period before coverage goes into effect. So you cannot wait until hurricane season is knocking on the door and then run out and buy a policy, because that will be too late. You won't have the coverage. So the time to act is now before you actually need it. Now, here's where I want to show you the one move a lot of homeowners are skipping. And it actually can lower your flood insurance cost. I'll walk you through that right now. If you already have an NFIP flood policy, one of the first things to do is take a closer look at your dwelling versus contents coverage. A lot of homeowners are paying for more content coverage than they actually need. when they could match just the required dwelling limit through NFIP and then shop private market options for any excess coverage they need. That combination is often cheaper than just upgrading everything through NFIP. Also, and this is something your insurance agent may not necessarily tell you, always ask for private quotes alongside your NFIP quote. Private flood carriers are increasingly competitive, and depending on your home specifics, they can come meaningfully lower. So the key is comparison shopping. Don't just accept the first number that you see. Now here's myth versus reality. People think I'm not in a flood zone, I don't need flood insurance. And the reality is flood zones are based on FEMA maps that don't always reflect local drainage, elevation changes, or storm patterns. And now with the citizens requirement, your policy status, not just your flood zone, determines what you need. All right, here's exactly what I need you to do this week. 5 steps, simple and actionable. Find your homeowner's policy, find out if it's with Citizens Property Insurance, and check your declaration page. Or call your insurance agent if you don't have your declaration page. And honestly, even if you're not with Citizens, I'd encourage you to go through this checklist, okay? So number 2 is find your policy renewal date and write it down and compare it to the deadlines, which is January 2026 and January 2027. This will tell you how much time you have to get your policy. Number 3 is check your home's replacement cost value. And again, that will be in your declarations page. So if it's at $400,000 and it's past January 2026, which it is, then this deadline applies to you. Get at least 2 quotes, one from NFIP and one from a private flood carrier. And don't skip the private market comparison. It takes 1 phone call and it could really save you money. The next step is to make sure to buy early. Remember, 30-day waiting period. Do not wait until you are in the middle of a named storm. Watch to try and get coverage because it will not work. You will not get the coverage. Here's the bottom line. The new flood insurance requirements in Florida are real. They're already rolling out and they're going to catch people off guard if they wait for the renewal letter to show up in the mail. If you own a home here on the Space Coast, in Satellite Beach, Melbourne, or Melbourne Beach, anywhere in Brevard County, take 20 minutes this week to go through that checklist. Know your renewal date, know your replacement value, and get your quotes early. That's how you protect yourself and your investment. If this was helpful, please hit that subscribe button. I post market updates and real estate tips for the Space Coast every single week, and I want to make sure you don't miss a thing. And please drop a comment below. I want to know, are you with Citizens? Have you already looked into flood coverage? I read every comment, and I'm very happy to answer questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.